we'd be starting now, and we would like to go for today's session, which would be more or less related to routing in Angular. All right. Did I say Angular? Routing in React. All right. So it's actually an occupational hazard. There is an Angular session also going on later in the day. So let's get the day 8 created, and let me just copy everything from day 7. So in the day 7, we went for Redux-Saga, where we were successfully able to get the API integration done, and we were able to get Saga integrated to our whole application. What I think is I should actually take this task manager project itself from the GitHub repository. Let me just delete this. I think this is already deleted. Yeah. So I would go into GitHub. And I'd get this task manager cloned into my folder. And we'd also go for installation of all the dependencies. All right. Let's wait for this to get done. And meanwhile, I'll also start the JSON server. JSON server db.json port 3001. And I think, yeah, this is still going on. Let's wait for a while. And also, while this goes on, let me just get you some idea on what we are going to do today. So this is not Redux-Saga. So the thing is, the library that we are trying to learn today, it is ReactRouter DOM. And this would be the onset of setting up routes. And we would again go for some more routing in the next session that we take in as well. All right, so React Router DOM. This actually, it's one layer above a library called React Router. So technically, we don't have to install React Router. If you install React Router DOM, React Router is already installed as a dependency for React Router DOM. So that is there, and we would get certain components and certain helpers and some properties and all, checked in this particular React Router DOM itself. But let me just first give you the agenda for today. So as far as the agenda is concerned, we do have certain things related to routing that we need to cover, where we'd first try and create 3 basic routes. One would be login, one would be register, and then there will be tasks. That is basically the task manager route. And login would take me to login component, or basically it'll show me the login component. Register would be going for the register component, of course. We do have the login component created, so I'll create a register component, but it'll be just a placeholder. There'll be nothing more into register as a functionality. You can implement the functionality similar to the login component, or maybe even you can use some additional like third-party libraries like Formic or Redux Form or something like that. And then this would take us to the task manager component. All right, so login, register, task manager, 3 basic routes. and then we'd like to go for a default route setup. So default route, what does it mean is that we would like to have a default route, that is when the user doesn't enter anything at all. We would like that default route to take the user to the login route. So just keep in mind that we don't want to just display the login component, but we want to redirect to the login route. That is the whole thing as far as default route is concerned. And then we would also like to go for a 404 route. All right, so which means something like this. It would look something like this, a wildcard route. You can also call it a wildcard route or a fallback route. There are so many names. All right, so what that does is this should show me the page not found component. I'll create a page not found component. All right, so we'll explain what this whole star means and all, how it works and all. We'll see what it is, and then we'd like to go for the task detail component. So task detail component would be, or task detail route, you may say. So that means we want something like tasks slash the ID, which will give me the task detail component. We have not created the task detail component yet, but we would create it, and that would show you the detailed the detailed task. And also there will be a parameterized route, so which means this ID that we are passing, we are expecting this to be dynamic, and hence this pattern where colon ID is given. This is the same thing when you follow this sort of dynamic routing with Angular or Node.js. So basically you can say that this is something similar in every JavaScript related project that you'd be doing. All right, so tasks is my tasks URL slash the ID. So this is a different URL. You can also keep this also like task. You can name this task details, but we'd like to make it as a, we'd like to follow the REST kind of a routing, and that's why we are just making it tasks slash ID. This would also allow you to get an explanation to one more property inside routing. We'll see what that is. So when you talk about task detail route, we definitely have to have the task detail component, but then there is a task service mechanism that we would like to go for. So this would cover service, routing, and component, everything. All right, so so this is sort of be a revision to what we are trying to do. All right, so these are the three basic routes, and then if time permits, we'd go for some more routing, but these are the three things or four things that we want to go for in today's session minimum. All right, so I believe this that we have done as the agenda, this we have listed, this is clear to everyone, right? Okay, what about other participants? I'd like to have a confirmation from everyone. All right, very good. Very good. So this is what we would be going for in today's session, and let's get started. Now, the thing is that if we want to get these things through, there are certain components and certain helpers and certain properties, as I said, that we should learn, and hence I'll list them out first, and then we'd go for them implementation wise. So we'd be using something like a browser router. Then there is also something called router, but I don't think we might be using router this time around. There is also a component called switch. There's also a component called route. There is also something called redirect. There's also a component called link that we'll be using. Apart from that, if we talk about the props that a component would receive, when you go for a component as a routing component, this would receive certain props automatically. We'll see when we implement the task detail component. The props are like history, match, and location, out of which we might be using history and match in this particular exercise that we are doing, or these sets of exercises that we have. All right. Other than that, link redirect props history.match. Yeah, this is all it. And router, the component has a property called history, which is a different thing from the props.history. We'll see what that is. And then switch doesn't have any other property. Route has a property called path. It also has something called component. It also has something called render and exact. And then redirect has a property called to. Redirect is a component, has a property called to, and this link also has a property called to. This props, by the way, it's the property of a component that we'd be passing in. So these are the things that we are going to learn as far as routing is concerned. All right. So we'll see how each and everything would be applied. But first, we'd like to start the routing setup. Even before creating these routes, we'd like to start the route setup in the index.js. All right. That is the first thing that we'd like to do. And as I said, we'd have to just install React Router DOM. React Router is a core library. If I take you to the React Router GitHub repository itself, you'd see that React Router, let me just go to the GitHub. Oh, GitHub was already there, right? Anyways, if I go to the GitHub repository from here, you'd see that React Router is the core library, and then React Router DOM is the DOM related library, that is web related library. There is also a React Router native, right, which is basically React native navigation. This is used, and then there is one other React native navigation as well as a library that is used, in React native applications. But we are just bothered about React Router DOM. This and React Router, it is the same combination as React.js and React DOM, where React is the core library and React DOM is the DOM related library. Similarly, React Router is the core library. React Router DOM is the web related, that is DOM manipulation library. All right, so we would be installing React Router DOM and we'd get React Router installed automatically. Let me just copy this GitHub link in here. It has a good set of documentation associated to it. I would just stop this and let me start my project. Let me open it up in my editor and go for a yarn start. That would start up our project. Okay, and in this whole src folder, we do have actions, component, index, and there would be a routes folder later down the line. As of now, I'll just start with index.js. Here is where we do the route setup altogether. We include the library or maybe the components from the library in the index.js to start with. So let's get that done first. And of course, in order to get the routing started, we'd have to install React Router DOM. So let me do that as well. Let me just have it with the browser side by side. All right, and I'll install the yarn add or npm install React Router DOM. All right, let's wait for this to get installed. So this data is coming from the API, we all know that. Yep. So even if I refresh, the data would stay. That's the whole aim of having that persistence and Redux-Saga done. All right, so let's wait for this to get installed. All right. So this being done, I would like to now get the initial setup done here, like import browser router from React Router DOM. So this is the first step where we import the browser router, and the app component browser router goes in like this. All right. And here I'd go for route component app. So normally we go for just the app component, but this time around when we go for the routing setup, we go for the route component is equal to app, something like this. Now this as of now, oh, I may have to import route here from React Router DOM as well. This as of now would not do anything. All right, this doesn't actually set up the routing for us. What it does is any request that goes on to your application, any routing request like /task/login or whatever, this whole 3 lines of code that we've written would actually forward those requests to the app component, and the app component then would take a decision on what component to show. All right, so this is just because app component is our template sort of a component where we need the header and footer the same, and the middle portion just gets changed. So that is the whole aim. All right, so this is the app component. That's why we are actually trying to have the app component make the decision on what component to be shown. All right, so this is generally the rule that people would follow, and this is what we would also do. All right, so I believe this initial setup is clear for everyone. Yes. All right, very good. What about other participants? Okay, I would like to have a confirmation from all, please, that this is clear. All right, very good. So now the rest has to be done inside the app component only, and we definitely need a register component here as well, because the first thing that we need to do is to set up 3 routes: login, register, and task manager. So register and register.jsx. All right, and in this particular register component, it'll just be for now just a functional component, doesn't actually do anything much. They'll just show you that register form works or something like that. But again, I would like you to get this form working essentially, like later on try some frameworks or libraries for form specifically. All right, so I would import React from React const register is equal to props and return paragraph register works. All right, export default register. And I would then like to also have a link back to login inside this register component. But for now, this would be fine. And I would like to import login and register All right. And we would not actually do this, of course this would show all the components, but what we would do is we'd go for something like this, route, and the route gets imported automatically from React Router DOM. So let me just keep it here. All right. So I would, first of all, I'd create 3 routes, and then there will be an additional component that is switch that will be added to this. And that would also be for a reason. So route goes like this: path is equal to login component login, something like this, and register and tasks task manager, something like this. So now what happens is, only and only when someone enters either login, register, or tasks inside the URL would these components be displayed. So say for example, if I go for /login, you should see the login component being displayed. Register would give me the register works for now. It's just that we want to display. And then tasks would give me the task manager. All right. Now, once we do this, we are actually done with the initial 3 routes. But what I would also like to point here is that if, for example, we are searching for the register route, right? And if this combination matches, this path matches to the pattern that we are going for, and if this is the case, then do you think that the register component would, or once the register component would be displayed, do you think that the tasks route should again be checked for the match? Yes or no? All right, this should not happen. So we would like to go for, yeah, just 1 minute, guys. All right, so we would like to go for the one more component in here, which is called switch, and switch would go in like this. All right, so what this would do is, this would actually not do anything right now. This would simply work as it was working earlier, login, register, and tasks. But this would actually stop the propagation if one route matches. For example, if login matches, then the whole propagation would not go on to match register and routes. The control would not go on to match register and tasks route. It'll just stop at the login component. But then if this doesn't match, then it'll go to register, then tasks, and so on and so forth. All right. So this doesn't do anything different than what it was showing us before, but internally this works differently. All right, so I would just like to confirm that the switch statement is clear to everyone. This works like a switch case kind of a thing. All right, very good. So now what we would like to do is, we would like to go for let's say one default route to start with, and then we'd also like to go for the 404. See, the thing is, if I don't enter anything, which means no route at all, that is the default route, and it doesn't show you anything because there's no match found at this point. So what I can do is that I can go for route path and slash, and what component should I show for now is login. Now I don't want this functionality to have exactly this output, but this is one way out where I can just show the login component on the default route to start with. Or you can also show the task manager component, depends actually on the requirement that you have. All right. So this is totally okay, except the fact that path login has to be also shown in here. So I don't want the default route to just show me the login component, but I do want it to get the redirection done to this path as well. And this path then should show me the login component. All right. So as opposed to just showing the component, I want to actually redirect to this route. All right. So I believe that problem statement, first of all, should be clear to everyone. Yes. Now, the way I would be accomplishing this is through another property inside the route that is called render. So it goes like this, render, and this render, it accepts a function, and the function returns us a component. So I can do this, for example. This would still show me the same output. This will still show me the default route with the login component. All right. But this render allows us to add a functional aspect, a functional layer to the component that has been rendered. So here I definitely don't want to show the login component, but I want to redirect. And I would do that, but just let's take a while to make some decision on this. Like if you go for render as a function, because it is a function, you would be able to keep you would be able to basically check whether the user is logged in or not, and based on whether the user is logged in, show him the either show him the login component or show him the task manager component. All right, so that kind of a condition can be implemented in here. However, as of now, we are just focusing on redirection, and in case of redirection, we'd have to import one more component that is called redirect from React Router DOM. And what I can do here is I can go for redirect to, and the route that I want to redirect to, that is login. All right. So what happens here is that if someone passes in the default route, then I would redirect to the login route. All right. And you can see that the route changes. It changes the redirect, but it actually doesn't show me anything. It doesn't show me the login component at all. And there is one property that is missing in here that is called exact. Now, if I do an exact path match for the default route, this would actually show me the login component, but that doesn't tell us like what happened, you know, why didn't it show anything while we didn't have exact, and why did it show the login component while having the exact. So if we understand, if we want to understand this aspect, we need to understand one more thing, that is the way the routes are handled in any JavaScript ecosystem. The default matching mechanism of a route is the prefix match. When you talk about prefix is slash for every route, right? Prefix is slash. So whenever I go for a slash login, the prefix that is slash would always match, and the first match is this, that is slash over here, which would again keep on redirecting to login. So basically this doesn't go anywhere and this doesn't show us anything. So when there is this kind of a default route sort of a mechanism, and when we want to redirect to something, it is always better that we go for an exact keyword that would match the full route and will not just match the prefix. So when I say login, it would exactly match slash login and not only the prefix, and hence it will show me the slash login component. In case of register, it shows me slash register if I go for it. All right. If, for example, I remove the exact, this would again match with the slash path, that's this one. So basically the default mechanism of matching is a prefix matching, while what I'm matching here is the full route, that is the exact route, and that's why I'm giving the exact keyword, so that only and only when someone enters slash, that is the default route, at that point only this path matches. every other time the subsequent paths would match. All right, so this is the exact keyword, and this is the redirection that we are doing to the login route, and that is exactly what we want. Like if I hit enter, I go to login. So this, I think, is something that should be clear to all. Yes, everyone? Very good. Very good. So this is our default route that we wanted to have. And now we would like to have the 404 route. This is also called a wildcard route or a fallback route. All right. Before that, we'd have to have a 404 component first. So let's create a 404 component. I would like to have it inside the shared folder, but then some people also think that it should be inside the components folder, which is totally fine. I mean, it's your choice. I'd like to have it inside the shared folder. I'll call it page not found. All right, and a new file. We'll call it page not found.jsx. All right, and here, if I go for a functional component, that'll be fine. Import React from React const page not found is equal to props, and this would return us. Well, what I want to return here is, of course, a React fragment that'll have maybe some heading or something like that, like h1 or something, which would simply give us, or h2 maybe. H1 is there already, so h2. Let's say 404. Page not found. And for now, I'll just go for an anchor tag, but this would change. All right, this anchor tag would change. We would like to make it more single page application type. Export default page not found. So if this is the case, I can import the page not found component to the app component. Page not found, like so. And let me just minimize this. What I would choose is this location, the last entry, to be the fallback or the wildcard route component page not found. So basically what would happen here is that if I, for example, enter something which doesn't match any of the routes that we have specified, like say, for example, about, all right, then it'll go to the 404 page not found. It'll take me back to home, and that'll take me back to login. So that is the whole aim. But then this is not technically a page not found route, but this is basically a match everything route. All right, and that's why it is called a wildcard route. You can just match every URL segment with this wildcard route altogether. But then my question is, like, if it matches everything, then while it is login, why doesn't it show the page not found right below? Now, can anyone tell me the answer to it? Anyone, any ideas? The exact URL not found is what Rita says. But Rita, what happens here is this means that match everything. So login is something which is a match over here. Because we already defined if login then show a component. Okay. But okay, let me do one thing. Let me get rid of this switch. Yep, Junesh is correct. Switch case. So if I get rid of the switch, all right, then you would be able to see login and 404. This is pretty strange, right? But the thing is, the default way that the routes are propagated is they would just match each and every pattern, and they would show the matching pattern. So this /login and /*, these are the two routes that match to /login at this point, because this means match everything. But because there's no switch case, both would match and both page not found and login component would be shown. And if I put in that switch, which means that once one thing matches, it doesn't move forward at all. And at that point, the page not found is not shown. All right. So here switch becomes very important. All right. So I think this usage of switch and the wildcard combination, this is giving us the 404. This whole combination should be clear to all. Yes. All right. Very good. Very good. Okay, so can we add more than one path on one route's path property? Well, no, Jinesh, that might not be possible. So if you want like two routes to point to one component, then you'd have to explicitly go for another route itself. All right, Jinesh. I don't think an array can be passed. And how to secure the path, Shubham, that is something that we might want to come across later. Like route in React router DOM. Let me just recheck though. If I go for route, the API, I don't think there is a possibility where. If you go for route itself, nope, no array as such. It's just a single path. Oh, you can see that there is a string array indeed. Okay. It says that you should be able to pass in an array, which means that you can actually pass an array. Yeah, that's there. The array passing is there. I was not aware of it. Anyway, so if we go for this, then what it means is that this would just, both these routes would point to the same component. That's basically what it is. All right, Jinesh. All right, good. And securing the routes, as I said, Shubham, that is a different discussion. We'll go for it later. That also involves a discussion on higher order components. We'll go for that later. All right, so this being done, we would like to now go for the task detail component. We have done the 404 component and then the task detail route itself. So we'll first get the task detail component created. And then what I would also like to do is inside the tasks, I would like to basically keep a link on each and every task so that I click on it and I can go to the task detail. All right. So if this is the case, then the task detail would simply be really simple, just that we need to get the ID of the task from the route, from the URL that is there. And before even doing that, I would like to point out a couple of more components. So if I go for something random, which is basically something that is going to trigger the 404. So if this is the case, if I click back to home, observe that my browser actually refreshes. All right, my browser refreshes, and it doesn't have to refresh. That is the way the route should work. So if we want the single page application type of a thing to be done where the route doesn't refresh, or the path or the browser doesn't refresh, and the component just gets shown right away. So in that case, we, instead of the anchor tag, we go for link. link from React Router DOM, and instead of the anchor, we go for link here. href becomes 2 as a property, and /a would become /link. So that way, what would happen is, if I go for something like about, which is not there at all, gives me 404. But now you can see that if I click back to home, you'll see that the browser would not refresh here. It would simply take me back to home and back to the login component, or without refresh. So in order to get that whole single page application going, we have to use link instead of ahref. Now that doesn't mean that this is any different than ahref. If I just do an inspect element, in the real time, link actually gives me an anchor tag with an href. All right, so this back to home is an anchor tag, but the React Router DOM's link makes it behave differently than what it is. All right, so that is basically the thing. And we would always use link, and it is also a good way to go for a navigation this time around. So we'll go for a navigation as well. So the navigation would be there inside the header. So let me just go into the header, and maybe in the shared we can create a nav like so, like nav all right, and import React from React, and the nav component would be good, and then I'll call that inside the header. And Shubham asks, can we put all the path inside a separate file? Yes, Shubham, you can actually create a separate component called route or routes maybe, and put this whole switch inside that route component and call that component in here, which is totally valid. All right, that is something which is something that you can do. All right, so we'll go for the nav though. We'll have the props, export default nav. And for now, what I would like to do is, I'd like to have a couple of links, one for the login and one for the register. So import link from React Router DOM. So as of now, I just want to go into login and register. And we know that instead of anchor tag, we'll always use link. So I'll go for that. And I'll return a nav element. Link to login. That'll be login here, and link to register. That'll be register. All right, and this is my nav component. And what I want is, I want to display the nav over here right on the upper right corner, so that later on I can also have the logout link or logout button included in here as well. So let me do that. And for that, I'll go into the header. And what I can do here is, I can import, I do have the React strap row column thing going. So I can just go for React strap row column, and this would be row, or maybe you can have it this way, like row/row. This would have the h1. Oh, row col could be a good combination. First column, I want the heading. All right, and second column, I do want the navigation. All right. Yep. Allows me to auto import. Let's see how it looks. Okay, doesn't look that impressive, but it does the job though. It takes me to login and register, so that is happening. I would like to style it a bit. First of all, let me have this column to be XS, that is the extra small screen size, that is the mobile layout. I like this one to be having 8 for XS. Yep. So it basically becomes a bit wider, and the navigation here. And then I'll just add some classes to this login. So class name, btn link, and I can also add class name btn link, something like this. So login register, this works. All right. And what I can also do is just some margin on top. mt2 would just give some margin on top, like so. All right, so this being done, we might want to now move on. But one thing, what do you think is missing in here? Can anyone suggest some better way of going for it? Like what should happen? Say for example, it is the login route that is there. What should happen to this navigation? Anyone, any good suggestions for the UI? Any suggestions? Well, my question more specifically is, if I go to register and if I go to login, should the navigation change in any way, like UI wise? This is actually a classic question. Active nav, very good. Login should not disappear if you are in register, or maybe if you're in login, but activated nav or active nav is basically something that that makes more sense. Like if I hit login, all right, then this navigation should be more or less highlighted or something like that, right? And if I go for register, this will be highlighted. Right now it is not actually highlighted, it is just selected, but I'd like to have a more of a highlight provided in here. All right, so I believe everyone is clear on what I'm expecting in this case. Palak had this suggestion, so thank you for that. Everyone agrees, right? So if you want to do something like this, there is actually a component which is Nav Link. All right, in React Router DOM, you can go for Nav Link. All right, and this most of the time it is the same as the you know, it is the same as the nav. So basically when I do nav link, then also this would work. There'll be no difference at all. All right, but what it allows you to do is it allows another additional property which is called active class, right? Something like active class name, and that will be btn, let's say btn primary. All right, so what this means is that whenever this link is active, whenever this matches to this route, the class name would change to btn primary. I'd also add the same thing to register, so it would behave the same way in the register as well. All right, something like this. And I would also like to have a text white in here. This is also a class from Bootstrap that I'm putting. Yep. Now you see that it actually activates. So whenever this pattern and this pattern matches in navlink, the active class name takes effect and it gives you that activated class altogether. All right. So this is basically what it is. So that is the difference between link and navlink. Link just points to something, no activation or nothing like that. But navlink gives you that activation. You can also go for active style as well if you want to. But for us, active class would be just enough. All right. So I believe this navlink and link difference, that is clear to all, right? Like to have a confirmation from all. Very good. What about other participants? Very good. So I would also like to point that out in here, like along with link, there is a nav link. We have an active class name provided as well. All right. So that is Nav Link for you. All right, so this gets done, and then we'd like to go for tasks. Tasks would not match anything, so the navigation would still stay the same. So now we'd go for the task detail component. We'd first like to create a task detail component. Now, where do you think should the task detail component be created? Should it be inside the task manager folder or somewhere in other, like it would definitely be inside this task manager, but where should it be created as a level of the folder? Anyone, any ideas? Rita says task item makes sense. All right. But what I want to do in this particular case is if the user clicks on this task item, all right, I want the whole form and list and all, everything to be replaced with that particular task item. All right. So I think it is better that I create it in here itself inside the task manager. It's the same level as task form and task list. All right. I'll create a task detail here because I want the functionality where clicking on the task item just this, just takes off everything. All right, task detail.jsx. I would like to have this one as a functional component to start with. All right, and I would go for a task detail component with props and return for now a paragraph saying task detail works, export default task detail, like so. All right, so if this is the case, and if I go into my app.js, I can actually now go for a task detail component in the route itself. And this will also give us more explanation of what is this exact doing. All right, so I would import task detail from components, task manager, task detail.jsx, and I can do something like this: tasks slash colon ID task detail. So what does this mean is anything that comes in after the task colon ID means this is a variable. All right, so task slash anything should show us the task detail component. All right, so let's see whether this works or not. If I put in the task slash anything, would it show us the task detail component or not? All right, but can anyone tell me like whether this would work for us or not? If I go for a task slash say 1 2 3 for example and hit enter, which component do you think that this whole set of routes would show you? All right, Jinesh says it will not work. Jinesh says it will be the task manager. All right, very good, Jinesh. What could be the reason? And Jinesh is correct actually. If I go for something like task slash 1 2 3, still shows me the task manager. All right, and the reason now should be pretty clear actually. What could be the reason? Can anyone tell me the keyword, like the main cause of this tasks being matched? Okay, very good. Rita suggests that we should use exact. Shweta suggests that we should use exact. Basically, the prefix is matching. All right, there is a prefix match that is happening, which is this, and it is showing the task manager. And since we have used switch, it doesn't move forward after the task manager component at all. And Palak also has another suggestion that this task slash ID should be above path tasks, which is also valid, which would also work logically, but that would simply not describe our code. So we would use the exact property in one of these routes. Now, can anyone tell me which route should we be using exact property at? Should be tasks or should be tasks slash ID? Rita says should be tasks slash ID. All right. Should we use it in tasks slash ID? Other participants? Let's say if I go for tasks slash ID exact, right? All right. Palak says it should be tasks. All right, Shweta says tasks. So anyways, if I go for tasks slash ID and put it exact in here, due to the prefix matching possibility, this would already match, and the control would not even go to the task/id at all. All right, so exact here would not even matter, right? So what can we do is we can use exact in here. This would actually describe our code better. Palak's solution would also work, where we can shift the task ID above the tasks, and that will also work. Everything would be fine, but that would not simply describe things. We are putting in exact, hence we are describing the code that this is what we want to match exactly. And that would also convey a lot to the developers who are developing your project. All right, so now you can see task/1 to 3 gets me task detail works, and this gets me tasks only. So this being done, all right, I would like to now go for just one confirmation that this placement of exact and why is it required, and why the task/id we didn't put it right above the task, which would also have worked. All right, all those reasons, I believe that thing is clear to all. This whole route setup now finally is clear. All right, like to have a confirmation from everyone. Very good. All right, so now let's try and link these tasks to the task detail component. All right, and also you may have observed one thing. Right now the tasks route is accessed right away, but technically what we want to do is we want to first make the user log in, and then I want the user to access the task route. Other than that, the user should not access the task route. That is one. Plus, if I'm logged in already and I'm onto the task manager UI, at that point login and register should change to log out. That is another thing that we would like to go for. So all these things would come into picture, but not yet. All right, today we are just focusing on the setup that we want to have, the detail and all the route related setup. All right, so now we would like to go for linking, and for that we would have to choose one component where we would be coding things in. All right, so we have all these components inside the task manager. Where do I use the link component, in which component from the task manager, so that clicking on the title should take me to the task detail? So what component do I start working in, guys? Very good. Jinesh actually has the correct answer, and the answer to it should be what component has the title displayed. All right, and the answer is task item. So Jinesh and Rita are correct. I believe everyone would agree with them. Task item, here we would create that link. Is that correct, everyone? Very good. So we would go for importing link from React Router DOM, and link task title to okay, I would go for a interpolation, because what I want is to /tasks/ the task.id. So I want to have a dynamic ID generated all the time. So what it means is, first of all, you can see that it gives you that link altogether. If I do an inspect element, in the elements you get that dynamic ID over here. Similarly, all the other links, task 3 and so on and so forth. So that is something that is done. If I click on any one of the link, you can see that task 2 is populated, and task 4 and so on and so forth, task 3 and so on and so forth. Takes you to the task detail. All right, we need to use Nav Link is what Shubham says, but I don't think, Shubham, Nav Link is important in here, because here we don't have to highlight anything as such, because we are already out of that whole listing. The list is not displayed as well, so I don't think Nav Link would be useful at this point. I mean, Nav Link would not make any difference. All right, Shubham. Okay, so this being done, and we would like to now get the ID from the URL, and we would like to first display it inside the UI of the task detail component. All right, so that is my next problem statement. Inside the task detail component, I would like to get the ID from the URL, that is, for example, 5 in here, and I'd like to display, first of all, display it inside the UI along with task detail works, and then I may want to also call an API to get the task details altogether. All right, so I believe this problem statement is clear to everyone. Yes. All right, what about other participants? Very good. So we'll do the same. I would like to first do something like this. The question is like, how would I get the 5 or the ID that is being passed? How would I get it inside the component? So if I do a console log of props, console log props, do you think that in this console log of props, based on whatever we have declared inside the app.js, which is this, do you think that there should be anything extra as a property? Like, do you think that we should get any properties as well? Anyone, any ideas? And I don't need the correct answer. I just need to know what you think in here. Do you think that we have passed anything? We should get anything? All right. Parth says ID. Okay. All right. Jinesh says no. And that also makes sense because we have not passed anything explicitly. So let's see. If I go for an inspect element, you can see that we get an object. All right. And if I check out the object, you see that there are certain properties like history, location, match, and all. So these are some properties which we have not passed, but it is the route component where the task detail is used as a component. It is the route component that has passed the additional properties to our task details component. So a simple demonstration could be like if I take the task detail outside the switch case, right? Just like that without passing anything at all. And if I save it, so in this URL, there'll be two task detail components 2 times. The first one doesn't have any object at all. We have not passed anything. But the second one, because it is the route related component, we have this history, location, and match, and all the routing related properties which the route component passes. All right. And what we are interested in is, we are interested in this match params. Params is an object that has ID equal to 5. This colon and whatever that we specify is the key, and ID equal to 5. If I just specify I in here, for example, all right, and if I save it, you'd see that the match would have I5, right? So it is the ID that we are getting anyways. But this makes one point very clear, that if you pass any component as the component of a route, the route itself would pass in additional properties which are routing related, which we can make use of. If you are just calling a component, those properties would not be passed. So which means header, footer, in header and footer, these properties are not there, but anything related to the route would have these history, location, match, and all properties being passed. So that has to be clear to all, first of all. So please confirm that. And everyone who replied also, I believe everyone is clear on what is happening at this point. All right. Very good. And as I said, we are interested in the props match.params property. All right. So if I go into the task detail and go with like props.match, and props.match would give me just the match, and the match has params. So props.match.params would give us that whole parameter, right? ID equal to 5. Now I can get the ID interpolate, or sorry, destructured, like const ID is equal to props.match.params, and ID over here like so would be there. So task detail works ID equal to 5 would be the one in here. All right, so you can see now that anything that you have inside the URL, okay, you get it inside the UI as well. ID 5, ID 1, and so on and so forth. Okay, so first, this task detail that we have should be clear to all. that ID the way we extracted it, and we are displaying it inside the component altogether. So this is clear to everyone? And this would only be possible if the component is a routing component. Otherwise, it would not be possible. Otherwise, you'd have to do something with the state, that is Redux or something. All right, so this being done, now we'd have to work on another portion of this whole project. We definitely want to have the details of the task fetched from the API. All right, so we'll work on that. So Palak has a question, like, we may have multiple parameters. Shouldn't we fetch params.id? Well, Palak, this destructuring means exactly the same thing, that we are fetching params.id itself and putting it into the ID over here. So that's why we have specified ID specifically. If params might have multiple parameters, no worries. We'll just take in the ID only. All right. So now we'd like to fetch the data from an API. So in that case, we do have one system already going. All right. There's something that is already happening, which is doing some API calls for us. So if we want to make an API call, what is the first file that we should modify to start with? Anyone, any ideas, any suggestions? Saga file for watcher. Okay. But even before that, if we go for the Saga file for watcher, okay, that is fine. But even before that, what should we be modifying? Or which layer of our whole task manager setup? Okay. Actions, even before actions. There is one place where we are actually calling the APIs. That is the first thing that we have to work on. Which folder? Anyone, any ideas? Config? Not config. Config is already done. I mean, if I go into the config already has that, URL, that is the task URL created, and we are done with the config. And then where are we using the config? Where are we actually writing the code that would call an API? Service, very good, Jinesh and Keshan. Services, the task service.js here. All right. So is that clear, and everyone recalls this services? Yes, everyone. Should not forget this very important aspect. All right. Export const. I'll go with a get single task, and this get single task takes in an ID, and we'd return axios.get task URL plus slash plus the ID. Right. So we are just getting task URL slash ID, and that would give you that single task, and then we get the entire response. But what we are interested in is response.data to be returned. Right, so this is the get single task, and then we can task URL RL should be capital. And once the get single task is done, we can go for the action. We can go for the the reducer, but I don't think, or not even the reducer, but we can just go for the action, and maybe we can go for the Saga and all. But I don't think Saga would be necessary for task detail, because we don't want to have the store involved as far as task detail is concerned. So we would just right away call the get single task inside the task detail. We don't want the store or the Redux store to be involved in here. All right. So I would be calling this get single task API inside the task detail directly. So let's do that. Services, task service, and here after getting the ID, I can go for like get single task with an ID. Because it is a promise, I'll go for then, which will give me the task. For now, you can just do a console log of task. All right. And there you go. Gives you the task number 1. And if I go for learn APIs, gives me the task number 4, and so on and so forth. So that works. Now, what I want to do is I want to display the task inside this return. Would it be possible, or how would it be possible? That is a more relevant question. I want to go for this task to be displayed inside. Very good, Jinesh. Jinesh suggests that we should be using a class component. That's correct. We should be using a class component. And why would we be using a class component? Anyone, any suggestions? Jinesh is correct on the fact that we should be going for a class component, but why a class? So now let me give you a hint. See, the thing is, what I want is I want to call an API and maybe get a task declared like, or maybe let task equal to null. All right. And when I call an API, I would like to basically populate the task item with some data. And when that variable is populated, I would like to re-render the component. All right. So that whole re-rendering has to happen. So if that re-rendering has to happen, then what should be done? Whenever some property changes, I want to re-render the component. So what could be the solution to it? Two hints now. One that Jinesh mentioned about using a class, and one that I mentioned about that whole re-rendering aspect. So now I think you should be able to connect the dots. Someone should be able to come up with a solution. Anyone? Any ideas? Okay, another question or a hint. What do we use so that if it changes, the component re-renders? It's related to components only. So when something changes, the component re-renders. What is that? I would like to have an answer from someone. Someone should remember, right? Very good. Very good. Return Palak say state. When the state changes, the component re-renders. And I believe everyone recalls that is state, right? Yes, everyone? I hope everyone has not forgotten the initial building blocks that we went for. So everyone recalls that state of a component when it changes, the component re-renders. Yes, everyone? All right. Very good. So of course that is the thing that we want to do in here, that we want the task to be stored in a state so that whenever the task gets filled with some data, the component re-renders. And for that exact same reason, because we want to use the state of the component, we want to have the component as a class component. Yes, I believe Jinesh, you are also clear on this, and everyone else also. Like, why should this be a class component? Should be clear to all. All right. So I would go for this to be a class. Extends component. For now, I'll just keep it away. All right, and this class would have a render method, and inside the render, I would go for the ID, but then again, instead of props, it'll be like this dot props. All right, and then we display the ID. And then we call the get single task. Should I call the get single task? Or maybe we can first start by declaring the state. So state task. To start with, I'll go for task to be null. And I would also do a conditional render in here. I can get task from this dot state. And if there is a task, then we would display the task detail. All right. Else I'll just return, say, a paragraph maybe, or an alert would be a better way to go for. Import alert from React strap, alert, uh, loading. All right. So as of now, because the task is null, I just have loading. But then when we go for that get single task, and when the task is populated, it will not have null, and it will show me the task detail. All right. So we'll do that. So now let me also go for something in here as well. Like there is something called card and card header and card body. Card header. Let's say if the task is available in the header, I would like to go for, let's say, task title, and card body, I'd like to go for task dot description, right, in a paragraph. And I think I can go for, inside the header, I can go for an H3 probably. That would simply display a better header, right? Something like this. So what I'm saying here is that if the task is not null, then display the whole card and the way the card looks and all. And if it is null, which means if this is not the case, then return loading, right? So this is what it is. You can also do an inverse of this. And now I can go for get single task. So I can do something like get single task, pass in an ID, dot then I'll get the task, and I can go for this dot set state task. So this I'm using the ES6 shorthand, where I'm not going for task colon task, but we're just using one of the key values because both of the key and the value are same. So once I do this, you'd see that you get the task, but there is one problem that is there now inside the JSON server. You can see that you get multiple requests going one after the other inside the JSON server. So that is the problem with the set state that is happening inside the render. So what could be the solution to this? We have come across the solution while we went for Redux-Saga as well. Not yield. This is more of a component related thing, Palak. When should the get single, or exactly how many times the get single task would call? Yep, Rita is correct. Component did mount. I believe everyone agrees with Rita. Component did mount. Component did mount would be called, and I put the ID inside component did mount. Oops. And also the get single task inside component did mount. Right now, what would happen is you can see that the whole API call, the sequence would stop, not be basically calling things again and again. And component did mount did it for us. All right. So I'll also have a sort of a back to tasks kind of a thing. And for that, I may go for link. Ooh, link has to be from React Router DOM, right? Back to tasks, and this should be like 2 tasks. This should take me back to the tasks. All right. So again, no refresh whatsoever. It is working as it is expected to as a single page application, and we are getting back to tasks as well. Okay, so this is the task detail component that we wanted to implement, and we implemented it through a couple of things like task service, and then converting it into a class component. This whole thing can also be done through a functional component, We'll go for something called React hooks later. So that would give us the whole functional component aspect. But then we also saw the Nav Link working as well. And the Nav Link would then be also replaced with a logout button while we are inside the task. So those whole things we would like to definitely cover. All right. But apart from that, whatever we did today, where we wanted to have the task route created, the 404 route created, the default route, and the 3 basic routes, that is this basically gets you a very good introduction on the overall way of how a route would work. All right. So I believe this is clear to all. First of all, these 4 points. I'd like to have a confirmation from everyone. Okay. All right. Now, with this being done, now what we would like to do is, like in the next session, what we would like to do is we'd like to get the login and log out kind of a functionality done, where you would be checking for a valid login credentials, where the user would be entering something and then you'd be checking it against some service. So as of now, there's only one service, that is task service. Later we'd also have a user service which would have their own related methods. That is something that we would definitely go for. And we would then like to also get the authentication done as well. But then when it's a user service, users are generally managed in the global state of the application. So at that point, the Redux and Redux-Saga, everything would come into the picture, and that would give us more idea on routing as well. So the next session that we would be conducting, it would be sort of a revision to whatever we have done, like Redux, Redux-Saga, components, services, everything included. And then we'd also go for something called a higher order component to get the routing authenticated. So that is up for the next session, but I believe this session, we can just call it a day, unless you have any questions. So if you have any questions, just ask them out, or you can say 0 if you don't have any. And then I can conclude the session. All right, what about other participants? The then statement for get single task. Yes, Rita. So the then statement, it's basically a function. All right. So it is sort of a function like this, which does this dot set state. But then this dot set state, what we want to set is the task property, and the task property of the state, I am to set it to the task that I obtained over here. So I can go for, like, for example, this is T, right? So I can go for task is equal to T, and that would also work, by the way. All right, this would give me the whole Redux-Saga and all. So first of all, this get single task, but then this one is clear to you, right, Rita? Right? And then we're just making it more compact, like task, and then we can go for task. But then that doesn't have to happen because ES6 provides us a better way of object shorthand. Just keep it this way, right? And because there's only one statement, I don't even have to bother about the brackets and the function body and all. Make it really compact. And since there is only one argument, this is just something without brackets, so lesser brackets. All right. Okay, so I believe we can call it a day. And when we meet the next time, that is on Monday, we'll be going for the whole user management kind of a thing, where we'll be going for everything that we learned so far: Redux, Redux-Saga, ReactRouter, and components and services as well. So till then, bye-bye, take care, God bless, have a nice weekend ahead.